Welcome to this contribution for this Conference of International Perspective on Information Literacy and Meta-literacy. We, that are Danae, Driessen, Vedika Gupta, Yasmin, Kranewitter, and me, Lisa Lindemaier, worked on the topic of AI and cross-language communication. In this video, I'm going to give you a short overview of our research. I will start with the key information on our research, the experiment that we conducted, the secondary data we analyzed, and then I will explain what results we got and our overall conclusion. As for the key information, let me give you a short definition of the term cross-language communication. Cross-language communication in the context of AI refers to the ability of artificial intelligence systems to understand and generate content in multiple languages. The benefits of the cross-language communication in context of AI are, for example, that AI cross-lingual models can help overcome language barriers and foster a meaningful connection between people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. Some of the challenges that we are facing are that AI still has some problems with handling idiomatic expressions, cultural references, and variations in language structures, as well as maintain accuracy and fluency across multiple languages. So at this point, there are still a lot of research and development going on which address these challenges. We also wanted to do our own small research, for which we had to choose our research question. Before we agreed on our final research question, we had some more general ones, such as, can AI translate connotations to words, emotions, feelings, and sentences accurately? Which measures are in place to mitigate bias in AI language models? What ethical considerations arise in cross-language AI communication? How can AI reshape human communication in the future? And how is artificial intelligence-mediated communication designed? We then put the different aspects of the questions together to, in the end, compound on the following research question: how does ChatGPT overcome the challenges of context and bias in cross-language communication? As for the methods we used, we did some secondary data analysis on a few different papers, such as AI-mediated communication, definition, research agenda, and ethical considerations from Hannock and Naman, as well as Google Translate gets Voltaire literally translation and Age of Artificial Intelligence from Constantine, and Is ChatGPT Biased? A review from Singh. But I will go into depth on this topic later. We also used an experiment as one of our research methods, where we let ChatGPT translate a poem and a governmental paper into different languages. As for the poem, we used the poem Tiger by Blake, and as the governmental text, we used the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. For all languages that we had ChatGPT translate, we used the same prompt, which was translate to, and then we added the specific language we wanted, and just added the text that we wanted it to translate afterwards. We used this quite short and simple prompt to see what bias ChatGPT would use on its own if the prompt didn't contain any specifications on how to translate. Now let's look at the translation results. First, we let ChatGPT translate from English to Dutch. Here we could see that throughout the translation, we had a loss of the specific 18th century style and vocabulary. The translations were so literal that they broke the rhyme, the alliterations and metaphors didn't work with such a literal translation. All in all, the poem was unable to be translated with the correct context and rhyme and rhythm. As for the framework conventions, the translation had less of an urgent tone than when a human would have done the translation. And when we asked ChatGPT to give us a Flemish translation, which is more or less Flemish Dutch, it actually just gave us the Dutch translation. Here you can see an example for the translation through a human and through ChatGPT for our poem Tiger Tiger. If you want to read the whole translation, please pause the video again. We also asked ChatGPT to translate from English to French. Just like with the Dutch translation, we saw a loss of the specific 18th century style. The translation also broke again the rhyme, alliterations, and metaphors. Like in the first translation, ChatGPT was unable to translate the poem in the way a human would have done, so as that it still would be a poem. As for the framework convention, ChatGPT chose a lot more of neutral words and not such as negative words as a human would have done to convey the accurate tone of the paper. The third translation we had ChatGPT do was from English to Hindi. Here we had a lot more of positive aspects we saw for the poem. The translation had a very similar tone and conveyed the meaning and imagery of the poem very well. The translation also had rhythmic repetitions, such as the original poem in English, but still failed to keep the alliteration and metaphors because some of the translations were way too literal. So it had a more accurate translation for the poem than Dutch and French, but it still couldn't convey all of the specifics. As for the translation of the governmental paper, ChatGPT could translate very accurately and use a lot of efficient translations for technical terms that were used in the paper. And even though the sentences were quite lengthy and had a lot of repetition of words, it could also translate the governmental paper very well. Here you can see the translation of the legal text of the UNFCCC through ChatGPT. If you want to read the translation in more detail, please pause the video here. Now, we also had a lot of input from our secondary data analysis, which I also mentioned beforehand, were AI-mediated communication, definition, research agenda, and ethical considerations from Hancock from 2020, as well as Google Translate gets Voltaire, literary translation, and the age of artificial intelligence from Konstantin from 2019. And from this year we had Is ChatGPT Biased? A review von Singh as our secondary data. As we analyzed those data, we came to a few key points, which are recognition of the potential of AI in human communication in terms of multilingual human communication between human and I and human, as well as ethical considerations for the use of AI from the point of view of senders, receivers, and policymakers. Here we could see that depending on what position of view you have, you had to consider different ethical points. And we also could see that the machines are not yet able to tackle the complexities and nuances of literary text, as the context and subtext especially are not that easy to translate for an AI as it may be for a human. But the potential we could see in our secondary method was to analyze our secondary data, such as the papers previously mentioned. We had some key learning points from those analyses. As you can see, the main points were that we could recognize a lot of potential of AI in human communication, especially in human-human communications between different languages and human to AI communication. A lot of points were also on the ethical considerations for the use of AI from the viewpoints of senders, receivers, and policymakers, as those considerations differ between the viewpoints. And our third main point we could learn from the analysis was that machines are not yet able to tackle the complexities and nuances of literary texts. Now let's get to our results of our research. The main results we could get were that ChatGPT translates very literally and potentially leading to incomprehensive translation results as such. ChatGPT is better at translating legal text, such as the governmental text of the United Nations, than it is with poems, because it fails to translate the context, elegance, and stylistic devices that are used in poems. ChatGPT also repeats human biases and seems to be biased towards regional, older, and lesser-known languages. We could see with the Flemish Dutch translation, where ChatGPT gave us just, again, the Dutch translation. But what do these results add up to regarding our research question? Our overall conclusion gets to these 3 points: the potential of ChatGPT to break down linguistic barriers in the future, the need to address those biases inherited to ChatGPT through the deep learning and the training data, and the inability of ChatGPT to accurately comprehend and translate literary text. So to answer our question on how does ChatGPT overcome the challenges of context and bias in cross-language communication, it does not at the moment, but we see a lot of potential that it will be to do so in the future, as the development goes further and further, and we keep in mind that there are actual biases in the human speech pattern, and if we address those biases. Here we have all our resources again for you, if you want to also look at them. Thank you very much for your attention.